In this tutorial, we will look at using context and servlet initialization parameters in our Jakarta Java Enterprise Edition 8 web application. First, we will look at context parameters using web.xml, which we need for global configuration elements of our web app, such as database connections, key value security authorizations required to connect to cloud-based services. Then we will look at servlet parameters using web.xml. This is for servlet-specific config parameters, such as input from defaults or country and language maps. And now we'll go to our course documentation first. And we see that for using context initialization parameters, you declare it in your web.xml deployment descriptor file, and then you can read them in from another servlet. So we will do that back in Eclipse, and we are in our context parameter start branch. So we'll go to our web XML in our deployed resources under web-inf, and we'll add the context parameters in here. We'll format to make it look good. And now back to our documentation, and we are going to create a new servlet to read and display this context parameters. And we will override the doGet method. And following the example from our documentation, we will use annotations to define our web servlet. And now we're ready to run and test it. And we'll look at the defined path. And we see that we picked up our context parameters that we can use globally. So now we have a good example of global context initialization parameters. And now back to our course documentation. And we managed to see our global context parameters. Now we are going to look at servlet initialization parameters. And this time we will declare the servlet inside our web.xml, and then we'll create it. So back in Eclipse and our web XML. And here we define the servlet parameter servlet. We define the initialize parameter database and server, and we define the servlet mapping. So now we'll create this servlet. And we will override our doGet to get and display our servlet parameters. Now we are ready to run it. And we use our defined mapping. And we see we pick up the database and servlet parameters. I will see you in the next tutorial.